Hello, welcome to the Rooms with Ronald podcast, brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington. In 2023, I set an intention to shop 100 apartment communities to see how leasing was evolving around the country. Rooms with Ronald was born out of that experience. In this series, I share my experiences and engage in meaningful conversations with other professionals in the industry as we discuss all things related to leasing and marketing. Join in as we expand the Rooms with Ronald experiment. If you're still selling with smiles and scented candles, we've got news for you. Residents in 2025 expect leasing pros to be personal, precise, and fast. And they're not shy about saying so. From 5-star shout-outs to 1-star scorchings, today's renters are rewriting the leasing playbook. Welcome everyone to another exciting edition of Rooms with Ronald. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington. And in this podcast, we talk all things leasing and marketing. And I am so excited to be joined by my friends at Widewell. We have Jake Hughes, who is the Director of Marketing, and Katie Ritter, who is the National Director. Thank you so much for joining us today, guys.
1-star scorchings. Ouch.
So good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Excited
Katie,
to be here.
I just have to point out for the listeners, I have had lots of guests over the last year on the show, but you are my first repeat guest. You're the first one to come back and want to talk to me again.
It's an honor. Yep. Had a great time. You were our first, when we released this report from 2023, you were our first podcast where we got on to talk about it. And I just remember you having such great questions and digging into the data. So we're so excited to be back. So thanks for having us back.
Jake was busy out on vacation that time last year. So this is his first time on. So Jake, you're in for a ride.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I forget what I was doing. I'm sure it was something great, but I am sorry to hear that I missed. Oh, I was in Florida. That's right. In Florida in the sun. So
yeah. Well, Katie, I'm going to start with you real quick because, you're a repeat. You came back on, right? This is the second year that Widewell has released the Voice of the Residents report, right? And so, and a lot can change within a year, and we know that. When you were looking at this report compared to last year's report, was there anything that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I think for us, and just a little background on the report. So what we did in 2023 was we looked at about 500,000 Google reviews across the 150, the top largest multifamily operators in the US, and it ended up being around 20,000 communities. And we just wanted to see, hey, what are residents talking about? And without a survey, without putting, asking specific questions, it's let's analyze all of this trove of data we have and measure it. And how we decided to measure it was in percent mentions in positive and negative reviews. So positive meaning 4 and 5-star reviews, negative meaning 1 to 3 stars. So how often are these topics coming up in positive and negative reviews? And when we released the report for the first time, we released a lot of data. It was a lot of numbers. It was great. But I think what we wanted to focus on this year was continuing to keep up with the topic and the percent mentions, but now we have year-over-year trends, and now we have a good sense of what's going on in the industry, so we can layer some context around what we're seeing in the data and answer the question of, well, what are residents saying make a great tour? What is a great move-in, and what does that look like? And so we're trying to just put a little more of a lens on the data to say, here's what residents are saying they want, here's what's driving a great experience, here's what's detracting from it. So this year, one positive note, customer service took a big leap in topics. And I do think that has to do with a lot of our new communication tools, AI. It's giving the answers that that residents are asking for at a really quick pace. So we saw customer service jump to the number 5 topic most often mentioned in positive reviews. And that was, to me, a great signal in that we are starting to address concerns, get back to folks quickly. Speed was another theme that I saw. Last year, it was like, hey, I can't even get someone to pick up the phone. This year, it was the turnaround was quick. I got my answer. So they mentioned speed. So little background on the report, but also a positive that came out of the report this year, and that was encouraging.
Yeah, I think that speed, it is getting better. And I think part of it too is like we do have those tools, right? So like I no longer have to wait for the leasing agent to respond back to me about what the pet policy is or how much the pet is, right? Like we're in an age where almost every website has this chat, right? You can go on and I can chat with the AI and the chat bot, and it allows me to do that. So I definitely think that kind of helped that as well. Jake, was there any surprises for you?
Looking at just the fundamentals before we get into the technical stuff of the topics, I think we analyze reviews as part of this idea of reputation management and controlling your image more broadly within the marketplace. So we typically look at some basic reputation metrics. How many reviews are the communities generating per month? What's the average rating? And signs are all positive. So the industry is improving in its ability to capture resident feedback. And star ratings are up to 4.1 stars on average this year, which I think there's some debate of what is a good rating within the industry. Last year, the average is 3.9. This year, it's 4.1. So the industry is improving, and the industry is getting better at activating the voice of the resident and getting them involved in the conversation and sharing positive stories as well as the negative. So that's an encouraging sign. Review volume is also up a little bit. The topic story that was most compelling to me is this idea of specificity within reviews. So we see residents becoming more precise in the way that they describe the situations that have happened. And I think it is very informative for prospective residents and also very useful for operators. So as Katie mentioned, speed is coming up more. Instead of residents just talking about being timely or prompt, words are getting more specific, like same day. This was solved within a day, 24-hour turnaround time. There's a lot more specific language that's being used. We see that within the context of renewal reviews, rent mentions dropped 27%, and fee mentions rose 21%. So we almost have a one-to-one swap in the language around what residents are paying for, and it's shifting to something more specific than just the general concept of rent. And then finally, staff, which is your on-site teams are the number one driver of positive reviews. They were last year, they remain to be this year. It's not even a close fight. But mentions of on-site teams dropped slightly within positive reviews. No big deal there. But we see that mentions of tour guide rose 18% year over year. So we see that a big spike in mentions of a more specific individual within the team rather than this overall descriptor that would be staff.
Yeah. You talked about like being precise, right? And I kind of feel, knowing that residents are using more almost scenario based in the reviews, right? This is what happened. They came to fix my garbage disposal within the same day or within the hour. So they're describing the timeliness, they're describing the staff, they're using the names of the staff, the outcomes. So based off this, what I'm hearing and taking about it is it's almost like our leasing teams should be reworking their communication to be as equally specific and precise as what the residents are doing. What do you think about that?
I think it goes both ways. So there could and likely is an element here of this sort of like parroting mimic effect. So 24-hour turnaround could be more efficient process, or it could be marketing language turned into a review, which is great when it works, because then you have this residents putting out into the market the specific marketing language that you want to promote. That's great for your community. When it doesn't work, then you're getting dinged for an expectation that you set right off the bat, which it's sort of like how much risk do you want to take on? Do you want the reward, but you do have to deal with the downside of, are we setting unrealistic expectations?
Yeah. I mean, I was recently at a conference and someone mentioned, it was a little old school, but when I first started leasing, we used to have a maintenance guarantee. Like we would come in, like have you fixed in like 48 hours. Your work order would be closing in 48 hours. If not, you got like a 1 month free rent, right? And I don't hear that very often anymore. But I was recently with someone and they were like talking about this company is still doing that. And I was just like, I instantly went to reviews. I was like, how often are people like saying, yeah, they had this guarantee, they didn't meet it, and now, now I got a 3 months rent, and how often did they have to execute it? So like, I could see it both ways.
Yeah. I also wonder if it's because what I think what we saw in some of the language shift was speed. Yes, it's important. And they were exuberant when it did happen, right? It was like, oh my gosh, this was within hours or within 24 hours. I think what we also saw is comfort in knowing that there was like an actual system and process behind the whole thing. And management was seen more as facilitating that. So I almost wonder if in leasing, like getting really specific about the process versus, hey, we're going to have this done within 24 hours. It's here's exactly how this process works. And here's how you submit if something goes wrong. Here's what happens on our end. We'll be able to track this and see this all the way through. So you can call and check in, but we'll also give you updates on. So I think just signaling that like, you've got it, it could actually go a long way versus having to tie yourself to this 24-hour, 48-hour expectation that just misses. I think people aren't necessarily expecting perfection. I think they're expecting transparency and process and just knowing that it's being addressed. So I think that could be a shift there of just describing that a little bit better.
Yeah, I totally agree with that too. Because I also think like from a pricing standpoint, because that's always a hot topic, right? Like I moved in and I didn't know the fees and things like that. And I don't feel like it's necessarily like they're charging the fees. I think it comes down to it wasn't communicated to me, right? And like I don't mind paying, $150 if I know that up front. It's those surprises. So like I think that's also probably, I feel like from just shopping properties, that's becoming more and more clear across the country now. Like I'm getting more in-depth explanations of things. So recently I shopped a property and they said, oh yeah, and we have a $15 a month porter fee. And I was like, what's a porter fee, right? And they're like, oh, well, that's for our groundskeepers to take care of the common area thing. So like, I was like, okay, so they didn't do the best job at explaining it, because like in my mind, I instantly went like, oh, so I'm paying your payroll for your groundskeeper to like,
right, that's where my head went to. I'm like, isn't this just what you should be doing?
From?
You're charging me $1,800 for a studio, so that should be. But they did say that up front, so I was like, okay, So I think like we're getting better at setting the expectation so people know. I just think the next step is to like being able to communicate that precisely and in a way that, like we just said, it doesn't come across like I'm paying an additional payroll for you.
I wonder, like, where do you feel like the line is with that? Because to me, like, keeping common areas clean feels like something that should just be a part of the expectation. So, like, a fee like that, would it make sense to just list the rent at $1,815 and just, I don't know. I just don't know I know I get fees. I understand that they have to be there, but I just wonder where the line is with things like that of like, can you include some of that where it's not like, well,
nickel
we're
and
doing
diamond,
this too.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there is a line, right? And what it comes down to is like everyone needs that ancillary income. So like maybe I would have called it, something like a common area fee. And that's for us to like, make sure that the toilet paper in the bathrooms are fully stocked with your needs. And they had towels at the pool, right? So you have the towels and like you have the pet, like all of those different things that could have sold it a little bit better than calling it a porter fee. Kind of like comes down to that.
That makes total sense. Even just you shifting that to like, well, there's a pool and there's towels and like we want to be accommodating, like that makes sense to me. And I think, yeah, how people talk about it and sell it just in the context of the residents day to day is so important. Cool.
Jake, did you have any other like anything really stuck out in the report to you this year from like a leasing standpoint that you're like, oh, I never thought about it that way, or that was kind of like that surprise to me?
Just to build off that last point that we were going through, I think when we look at negative mentions within reviews, broadly speaking, communication is the number 4 topic mentioned in negative reviews, almost 18%. Fees is number 8 at 11%, and rent is number 10 at under 10%. So under 10% of negative reviews out of, the 1 million reviews we studied mentioned rent at all. And communication comes up almost twice as often, and it is decreasing year over year as well. So communication is sort of the blanket that is put over all elements of resident experience and can color things good or bad independent of the material interaction itself. Like the interaction could be below standard or there could be problems, but if the communication is exceptional or very specific or useful, then it sort of balances out and you can, I don't know if this is like a winning scenario, but you could have a win as an operator, even if there's something that you're trying to work through.
Yeah. And I mean, I think everything like at the end of the day comes down to that like communication part of it. Like I tend to be an over communicator, which is probably why I was very successful when I was like leasing, right? Like I over communicated the expectations. I over communicated what I needed from you. I over communicated the next steps. And because I'm a person, I don't like surprises. I don't want to like get somewhere and be like, oh, I was not expecting that. So to see like kind of that coming out of the report is like a win. That's a win to me.
Well, we look at what the top drivers of resident satisfaction are during leasing, and we're looking at both tour scenarios and renewal scenarios for this. We see a few things come up. Responsiveness leads the way. Professionalism, but friendly. So you need to be, conduct yourself, but also be likable in that same context. Follow through with what you're about to do and kind of answering questions and running them through the process and transparency. Safety and alignment with maintenance. We definitely see some issues come up with maintenance alignment, particularly transitioning into the move-in phase. Communication there is very important. And we see some evidence of missed or overpromising, misaligned expectations. Maybe the unit that was shown was not the unit that they moved into. So I think those are a number of things to keep your eye on during the leasing process that drive satisfaction. At the top of the list for tours, it's still staff. Staff's mentioned in 77% of positive tour reviews, followed by helpfulness number 2, amenities number 3, and process number 4. So amenities you can't really change easily or quickly, but the team, how they conduct themselves and how the process runs and communicated are things that you can change.
And then, so, out of that 77 of that like staff mentions that were positive, a lot of them were using their names correctly, right? It just wasn't, I feel like a couple years ago, like you would see, oh, the staff was great. But now I feel like I'm seeing like Jake was awesome at explaining the layout of the 1 bedroom on the tour. He was like super friendly.
Yeah, we see, broadly speaking, and we see this in other industries as well, in positive context, the individual tends to be highlighted by name. In negative context, the individual is not highlighted by name. So we see more mentions of management within the negative context because it's sort of this like catch-all. Whereas within positive reviews, you're mentioning individuals that are like driving that positive experience.
Yeah, I mean, hey, that's a win. I mean, I personally, like, if I have a bad experience with someone, I have no problem writing a review using their name. Like, can you believe that this person did this? Katie, anything stick out to you?
Yeah, I think what we also did for the first time in this report was understand kind of tone shift from reviews. And one of the things during leasing specifically that we saw was in 2023, I think, residents just wanted some consistency. Like in negative reviews, people weren't getting back to them. They weren't hearing anything. They just wanted friendly, professional visibility and responsiveness. I think this year what we saw is just more specificity in like execution and wanting like accountability. I think because we're now more responsive, they have more information, and we're seeing that the reviews coming up are complaining about, well, the leasing agent said this, that this unit would be ready. They have it in writing. They're communicating via different channels, email, text message, and then they show up and it's a different unit. And now they have the receipts. And so we're seeing like those reviews coming in being really specific. And we're seeing it in maintenance too, of like these reviews are just looking like service case logs. It's just like on this date they said this, and then they said this, and then nothing happened. Or they said this unit was available. This is what we agreed on. I moved in and it didn't, it was a different unit. So we're seeing this almost mismatch of responsiveness, yes, but now they're saying you said this and the execution wasn't there. So responsiveness is now expected, but now it's the follow through where people are separating themselves.
Yeah, I feel like the first year we did this, we were still in this, I just need a place to live, right? The demand was just so high and the supply wasn't there, right? Like I was going to take whatever I can get, right? You had a 2-bedroom, I needed a 2-bedroom, and at that point I probably didn't even care, right? So like just answer the phone, right? That kindness. And now like we're seeing more choices, like the bottleneck has kind of went away, right? So now I have options, right? I need someone to be accountable, but I also want that transparency. I want that trust. Like the moment I move in and you say, hey, that unit's not ready. There's nothing worse from a leasing standpoint to have to call a future move-in, like, hey, I know your move-in scheduled for 10 o'clock today. Can we move you to 2 or 3? Or like, can you do tomorrow? Like that adds like that stress on it. But now they want that transparency. They want you to be trusted, right? Like you spend all the time building the trust, and the moment that happens, you break the trust and you have to rebuild it. So I think like doing that tone this year kind of definitely helps put some content behind the report, right?
Katie, I'm interested to get your take on this. Within tours, leasing process on the positive side is down 13% year over year. So we're seeing a reduction in positivity, but it didn't move very much on the negative side. So we see just under 2% increase in negativity for leasing process during tours. And I think when we do typically see that there's a disconnect between positive and negative. It's not, I think this notion of if negativity goes down, positivity goes up is not true. We don't see that in the data always. It tends to be, there are situations where the two disassociate and you, as an operator, get credit for doing something right, but no credit if it goes wrong, or vice versa, something like that. So this is an interesting scenario. Katie, what do you think of this?
I think there's two. We tend to see when there's an absence of positivity. So in this
I was going to
case,
say
leasing
it's usually
process.
the opposite.
Yeah.
Which makes
so the
this
absence
unique.
of positivity makes me feel like we've gotten better. It's been a better leasing process and more smoother, where it's not like a novel thing to write about anymore. So like there's this expectation that like, hey, I don't want this to take forever. Like there's more technology out there that really just guides you through the steps. And so that technology is now becoming the expectation. So when it does go smooth, it's not some novel thing anymore. It's not like, I'm not going to write home about it in a review, because this is now my expectation that this is tech enabled. This is smooth. That's just what I'm expecting. So I don't know. That's like, I have no data behind that, but I'm curious, Ronald, as you're shopping around, are you going through that process, or are you enrolling and like, creating an account and applying and all that? What are you seeing?
I'm not like, so when I go tour, like I kind of want to be guided, like what are the next steps, right? And um, I think to like your point, right? Like I think it's the expectation, and now it's like the bare minimum, right? Like I expect you to tell me that. So again, I'm not gonna. It's nothing for me to like jump for joy and like go above and beyond and like write this review. But at the same time, like it was an okay experience, so I'm not going to like have to really like go okay. I'm like okay, it was thing. No one really explains. Like I think I've done 24 tours this year, and only one has really sat down with me and like walked me through like what am I going to need to do, right? So like you're going to go click here, you're going to apply, this is what you're going to need to upload you, and when you upload this is what it's going to be looking for, right? You're going to we're going to be scanning your bank accounts, and you're going to have to put in your checking and routing number, which was something new to me, and I had lots of questions on that, right? And they couldn't really answer that part of it because it was a different tech, but I knew kind of like, here's the process and here's how long. What I am seeing though more of is once you apply, they're kind of giving me a time frame, right? And it's like we strive to have all the applications turned around in 48 hours or so. On the fact, if you provide us everything that we need, right? Because so they're kind of like putting it back onto me as a prospect, like, hey, we're going to have this turn around in 24 hours if you give me everything you want in a timely manner. So I think like that's probably why we don't see that, because people just become, once you do something, and we're seeing more people, turn over, jumping from property, especially now with the rise of concessions, you're going to start seeing people moving properties more. So it's just now like, okay, I know what to expect. Last year, I felt like people were just kind of staying put. And so when they did move, it was a shock to them because they're like, oh, it's a totally different environment.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine like if I were touring 24 properties and only one of them sat with me to go through it, I'd probably say Ronald was awesome, walked me through everything. And that's a point for staff, not necessarily the process itself. It's this person went above and beyond to walk me through everything. Whereas I think the standard now is like, go online and it'll take you through the whole thing. So I'm not going to write a review about the tech. I'm going to like, or I will if no one's getting back to me and I can't understand it. But I think for the most part, it's this expectation now. And if someone does go above and beyond, it certainly separates themselves, it sounds like.
Yeah. And I think like we are at a standpoint in the time where it's the little things, like you don't have to do that much to go above and beyond anymore.
Yeah.
Like using my name and following up with me in a personalized manner, and like it's that little touch point that I think could have the biggest impact on, reviews in general, right? Like making you, I personally think the more names that you can get your staff into the reviews, the easier it is for the prospect to want to come see you. Did you have any thoughts? You looked
like
you
that take. I like that take, Katie. Decrease in positive mentions of process is a good thing. I think there's so many little Easter eggs in this report of the changes of the environment impacting the resident and how they perceive the process. I think technology plays a large role in that. And it's tricky to suss out because they're not saying, wow, the AI bot that you guys employed this year for the first time is so precise and seamless. It's like, no, they'll say go on some other tangent, but the mentions of communication or process or things will sort of evolve here and there a little bit, which gives us some indication whether or not it's working.
I also think too, like now there are so many tools like for operators to like almost do their own little mini like voice of residence, right? Like you can pull your Google reviews into ChatGPT and from the last year and tell it to like find sentiments about this and look at the negatives and the positives, right? And so like to your point, Jake, like if a process reviews, the negative sentiment is down, but staff mentions are up, well, that I could probably correlate if I went to a property and said, well, that's because the staff is going above and beyond. So they're focusing on that part of it versus that. And like, I think more properties should kind of do that to get an understanding of what you guys do a great job at, like, here's the benchmark, but me as a property, like I'm competitive by nature. So I want to know, like, how do I stack up to that benchmark?
Or because the technology that you've put into the system this year frees up more time for your staff so they can give a better experience because their responsibilities have narrowed. Stuff like that you can suss out.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on like that really like stood out to either one of you as we wrap up our time together?
One other thought and data point that was shocking to me was just the rise of cleanliness in negative reviews. So you mentioned the porter fee and the keeping areas clean. Complaints of cleanliness are up 17% year over year. And we see that those complaints actually rise at the further you go into the life cycle. So tour, it's relatively flat. Move in, we see an increase. Maintenance, we see an increase. And then in renewal, we actually saw the biggest increase of 24%. So I think it's this thing that builds up over time that residents start to notice. And when it comes time for renewal, it's like, well, I've walked by the same piece of trash, or they start to remember all the things. And so we have seen this rise of cleanliness issues. And I think that's both, in unit, but also the building, the grounds, how things are being taken care of. So that would be my parting word of just sort of evaluating preventative maintenance, evaluating the cadence in which you're checking properties, if you have people off-site, all of that good stuff to keep an eye out for that because residents are noticing.
Yeah, I think like too, as a resident, right? Like when you move in, you're excited. You have your rose-colored glasses on, right? You're like, it's new, it's great, right? And you're willing to overlook that little thing or like this little thing. But you're right to that point. Like when I go by every day and I see it every day, I'm just like, is no one going to fix it? I go to think about, like, as I'm saying this in my head, I think about the Big Bang Theory and how the elevator's broken every episode. And like, that's like kind of like the comedy punchline, right? And I'm just like, but I can tell you, like, I've seen this on one of the properties I shopped recently in San Diego. Like, as a prospect, I noticed the whole area smelled like dog urine. So I was just like, it was overwhelming to me. And I was just like, but we even walked outside on one of the tours and like, they didn't mention it. Like, it was just like, pretend that it's not there. Right. And I was just like, if I had to do this every day, I would be the one to go on and write it like, hey, like, can we do something about the smell of dog urine? I'm very pet friendly. Like my dog is like asleep at the floor here, but like I don't want to smell that the whole time we walk in. Like every time I walk in and out of my apartment.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Jake, anything from you?
Yeah, I think within this report, I direct everyone to the renewal section. We have some great data on different topics throughout the life cycle that Katie mentioned, and you can see how resident perspective evolves as the kind of maturity of the relationship goes on. And it reveals some very interesting things. I think this year, number one driver of negativity in renewals is maintenance, and it continues to be maintenance. It increased a pretty good amount. It's up almost 11%, which is one of the more substantial changes within the report. And it's off a significant base as well, because it's mentioned often. So I suppose that's a little discouraging. I think it emphasizes the importance of maintenance and doing a good job. And cleanliness is sort of a derivative of that whole part of the resident experience. So when you get to the end of the life cycle, I think, fees, cost, rent, all these kind of pricing related issues might be assumed to be top of mind by the resident, but we actually see pricing mentions decrease 8% year over year in negative renewal reviews. So it's really, did I have good or bad maintenance experiences? Is the community well cared for? Is management doing a good job facilitating, coordinating the communication to manage this process? Management is also often mentioned in renewal reviews. So those are the things that seem to be top of mind for residents this past year.
I love that. I can definitely, pricing dropping, that does not shock me at all, because I also feel like at renewal, I feel like we had a couple years where we had high renewal increases, like people were saying $200 and $300, $400. And I think like we're now going back to seeing that pretty standard, right? The 3 to 5%, and in some places even staying flat. But I think you're right. Those are the little things. Like maintenance has the biggest impact on the renewal, and like that does not shock me that what we're seeing that mentioned that time of renewal either. If people wanted to find the voices of the residents, where could they go hunt down this report and read it for themselves?
Yeah, so the report's available. Anyone who wants to download it, widewhale.com/VOR, widewhale.com/VOR. That's the best way to do it. You can download it for free, anything like that.
Perfect. And if people want to connect with either one of you to pick your brain on what they could be doing better, or just the report in general, what's the best way to get a hold of either one of you?
We're both on LinkedIn. I've got my standard black t-shirt photo on as well. Katie, I don't know what your photo is. Katie's on there as well.
Our emails are also very easy. Katie@widewhale.com and Jake@widewhale.com. So if there's anything, feel free to send us a note. And we do for over 600 operators have their specific data on this. So we were able to break it down. And so feel free to reach out if you want to dig into yours a little bit more.
Perfect.
Yeah, if you want to get more specific, like Ronald was mentioning earlier, to your specific portfolio, we have that ready to go.
Ready, queued up. Just drop them a note. I'll be sure to tag both of you on LinkedIn so it makes it easier for people. I do want to say that well is not spelled like the well. It's WAIL. Just
yes,
in case
good call.
Can't. You're like, go to searching it right now and you're like, wait, it's not popping up. But we'll have this all tagged in on LinkedIn. Katie, hey, I want to thank you again for coming back and having the conversation. Jake, I want to thank you for coming on this time and not being on vacation. I was kind of jealous when you're in, Florida and I'm stuck in Indiana. I think there were so many great takeaways, and I can't wait to see what next year has to bring. Maybe I'll get you both back on later in the year, and we can make some fun predictions about what we think the report's going to be. What we're going to see. Just an idea.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Guys, you've been listening to Rooms with Ronald. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington. And until next time, guys, happy leasing. Bye. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope I left you with some fresh ideas or a new perspective. Leasing and marketing are evolving rapidly, and Rooms with Ronald is committed to offering a place to hear about those changes. We also celebrate and acknowledge the fundamentals of exceptional service that will never go out of style. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, or subscribe. Visit multifamilymedianetwork.com to learn more about our other exceptional industry podcasts, call pieces, and sponsorship opportunities.